Maura will now share her testimony with us.
And I hope everyone can see me. It's usually always a problem.
I can give you a huge up. We can make people grow.
A miracle right before your eyes. That's great. Thank you, Don. Good afternoon, everyone. As Don has mentioned, my name is Maura Garrihy. I'm 22 years old, and you can probably tell I'm not a dub. I have a Clare accent, even if I want to deny it. And I've been living in Dublin since last summer. And I suppose I just very briefly, for 10 or 15 minutes, want to share with you a bit about my own journey of faith. And how I'm standing here today, because I wasn't always into my faith, and God wasn't always a big part of my life, but thankfully I opened up a lot, and things changed in a very quick space of time. I come from a big family. There's 7 of us all together, including my mum and dad. So I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and I'm right in the middle. And as a child in the middle, I usually got blamed for everything at home. I don't know if anyone else here can relate to that. Now, some of the time, to be fair, I was responsible, but at least 50% of the time I wasn't. So I come from a big family, and growing up, there isn't much in age difference between us all. So there was never a dull moment in our house. There was always things getting thrown across the table. There was always doors accidentally slamming in people's faces. But it was a great time for me. My childhood was very, very special, and I definitely cherish those memories. But as a young girl in that environment with 2 brothers and 2 sisters, I struggled a little bit with my own identity, and I struggled to understand where I fit in my family. What was it that made me different? You know, my brothers and sisters would be quite passionate about different things, whether it be sport, whether it be something else. And there was always something that you could associate them with. But for me, I never really, at a young age, there was nothing that really you could identify with me. And I was just struggling a little bit to understand who I was, even as a young girl. And I come from a strong Catholic family. Mum and dad both practiced their faith, and as great parents and as great role models, they always brought us up to practice our faith. So we would have always went to Mass, and God would have been a very familiar name in our household. And we would have prayed the rosary every day as a family. And I suppose that did have an impact on me as a young girl. But it was always my parents' faith. It was always something that I would have associated with them, that they encouraged or forced us to do. But it was always something that I associated with older people, and I didn't really see the relevance of the rosary. I didn't see the relevance of God in my own life as a young girl. And this whole area of identity, how did that really fit in, I suppose, if you like, with this upbringing of going to Mass and being familiar with God? Well, I suppose when I went into primary school, I started to try and figure out who was Maura Garrihy. I started to try and figure out what made me unique, where was I gifted, and I suppose I had a very negative outlook on my own life and on myself, and I tended to focus an awful lot on what I could not do and on my own failures. And because I wasn't very confident in myself, because I wasn't sure of who God was, and because I wasn't sure of who I was as a result, I used to float a lot from different groups. So I had an awful lot of friends, but nobody really knew me because I myself didn't really know who I was. And I was born with a twin brother, Joseph, and sadly he died at birth. And we have quite an open policy in our house, and I would have always been aware of this, as this being part of my life journey. But I struggled with it even as a young girl, as I tried to get my head around this fact that I had a twin but didn't have a twin at the same time. So I think all of this that was going on in my head, this trying to figure out about having a twin, this trying to figure out who I actually was, it really confused me. And the fact that I grew up in such a big family, while it was such a blessing, I found it very hard that I couldn't get attention whenever I wanted it. Mum was at home 24/7, and Dad worked long hours. So generally it would have been Mum who would have been at home when we returned from school. And obviously with 5 little ones, it's very hard for her to be there for everyone. And it's not that we were ever neglected or that we ever wanted for anything, because we didn't. But I used to act up. I used to be very dramatic. because I wanted attention. I wanted to feel accepted. I wanted people to notice me. And I went into secondary school, and I was still struggling with my own identity and who I was, but I started to think a lot more about this whole God crack, or whatever way you want to look at it. And I started to really question my own upbringing. And obviously I was still going to Mass, because Mum and Dad are quite strong in their faith. While it's an option, if you like, in our house to go to Mass, we were still meant to go. So I was what I would describe as a routine Catholic. And I started to really distance myself from my parish and from my church at home, because as a young girl I was involved because Mum and Dad encouraged me to. I would have served at Mass, I would have read at Mass. And when I went into secondary school, I started to really just realise that the reason I went to Mass was because I was made go, because Mum and Dad brought me, and that actually I wasn't paying attention when I was present. I might have physically been present, but I wasn't mentally present at all to God. And I started to notice when I went into secondary school, I'm from a very rural part in County Clare, so the secondary school and primary school that I went to were quite small. And when I went to the secondary school, for the first time I started to realise that not all the young people that I was friends with actually practiced their faith. So when I went into first year and I realised this, and I noticed that people didn't believe in God, or that they didn't practice their faith, this was what made me question. This was the initial part of me questioning my own faith and my own relationship with God, which I really did just associate with my parents. So I decided really at that point that God really didn't exist. I knew I still had to go to Mass because Mum and Dad wanted me to, and I don't really like confrontation. So I probably saved myself the headache and didn't say much about it and continued on. But it was for me, it was a very tedious experience. And I was starting to become more aware of all the problems in the world and all the heartache that I could see around me in my own friends. And I started to really think, even if God did exist, it doesn't really fit in with the image of what I had been told about God as a young girl, that God loves us, that God's a loving Father. It didn't fit in with my experience of God because it was a very impersonal relationship that I had with him, and I really did think of him as someone who I went to when I was in trouble. So I didn't have a friendship with him, I didn't have a relationship with him, so therefore he wasn't a big part of my life. Of course, I know that he was there, and he was present just then as he is now, but I wasn't present to him. And when I went into third year, I experienced bereavement for the first time, really, and that's an important part, I believe, on my journey, because it was at that point where I was really experiencing the heartache of losing someone close to you, that I had no other option but to face up to these bigger questions about the reality of God, and the suffering that we experience as his children. And when I was in third year, because of my nature, I would be quite competitive, and I went to an academic school, and I really focused on my studies, and I wanted to get a good junior cert. So when my grandmother passed away, it was February or March, and I was absolutely heartbroken at her death, because she was such an integral part to our family and a real role model to me as a young girl, and continues to inspire me by her own life and the different struggles that she overcame. And when she passed away, it hurt me very much, because no longer could I call into her after school, no longer would she be an active presence in our house, no longer would she call over in the evening and pray the rosary with us and help me with my homework and all the different things that were going on. So when she passed away, I was very, very upset, but I didn't know how to deal with it. And I threw myself back into my studies, and I still had to sit my junior cert that June, so I didn't deal with her death at all. And then a week or two after I sat my junior cert, after I sat my last exam, my uncle passed away. So within kind of 5 or 6 months, I found myself in a line of mourners at the funeral home, so angry with God if he existed, because I still wasn't sure, but I was very angry that my experience of God at that moment did not match what I had been told as a young girl. But I didn't deal with either deaths, and my way of dealing with it, if you like, was to run from it. So I kept busy that summer, and I went into transition year, and I was in absolutely everything that there could possibly be, every competition, everything. I was right in the middle of it, and not only was I in the middle of it, but I felt that I was still struggling with wanting to be accepted and to be noticed. So it wasn't okay for me just to partake, I had to win. And I became very, very competitive, and all the time this anger and this bitterness was still in my heart towards God, but I was not dealing with it, I was running from it. And I was very, very blessed in transition year that we had an excellent school chaplain in my secondary school, and she told me about a retreat that was happening, a Youth 2000 retreat, just 20 minutes down the road from me in Ennis in County Clare. And I decided to be a weekend away from home. If I arrange that a friend of mine will go with me, sure, I've nothing to lose. I didn't really know what to expect. I had gone on retreats before with school, and I had kind of enjoyed the games and meeting new people, so I decided to go along. And that weekend, my whole life changed, as cheesy as it sounds, but my whole life changed, and I really felt God in a way that I had never felt His presence before, I had felt His love before. And on that weekend, one of the first things that stood out to me when I arrived on the Friday night was the witness of other young people who actually believed. So this whole me thinking that religion, God, the church was just relevant to to an old person got shot out the window, because I saw young people who were normal, and I saw young people who were passionate about their faith and who God was actually their best friend. And I had never experienced that before. So that was the first thing, I suppose, that really struck me that weekend, and if you like, kept me there for the weekend. And there was loads of time for adoration. There were different talks that weekend, but for me it was really the Saturday night. It was the reconciliation service and the healing service. So it was the opportunity to go to confession that blew me away, because it was there that I experienced God's love and His mercy. And I had gone to confession every year, whether it be through school or through mum and dad, but I used to just confess the same 3 sins, and my sense of sin was very distorted, also like my image of God, and I wasn't living a lifestyle that was worthy of the gospel or that was worthy of Him, and in many ways I was a bit oblivious to how sinful I was, and that weekend when I heard the priest prepare us for confession, I started to realise how far from God I actually was. I started to realise how unhappy I was, and I started to really realise how far from the original me I had actually come in trying to find happiness in this world. And I went to confession, and it took an awful lot of courage to go and to be 100% honest to the priest. And it was quite a long confession, because I went in with all the more easy sins to confess first, and it was like I had all this stuff built up, and I was trying to slowly but surely get to those ones. But God bless the priest, he was great, and he really guided me in that time. And I just remember coming out and experiencing something I'd never experienced before, this freedom, this weight being lifted off my shoulders, and I actually had experienced God's love. So all this that I had heard about God, I had actually experienced now. And I now wanted to stop sinning. I had now made a decision, which wasn't easy, particularly at the start. And every day, we continue to journey with the Lord and we go through whatever struggles. But I was making a decision to choose Him and to turn away from sin. And the freedom that I experienced coming out of that confessional has never left me, and I continue to live in that, and I continue to experience God's love. I continue to experience His healing every time that I go to confession. And for me, I had built up so much anger and so much hatred towards God for the bad things that I had experienced, for the sufferings, for my own inadequacies. My view of Him was quite negative, and it was going to confession that changed. And it was through that sacramental grace that I actually was given the ability to be the person He had created me to be, one day at a time. And that was my first real encounter with God, and it was through the witness of those young people, and it was through the sacrament of confession, it was through the Mass, it was through that time in adoration that I started to see what the church was about. This happiness that I longed for as a young person, that we all long for, that I had tried to find in every other place outside of the church, I had found in the place that I never expected to find it, and that's in a relationship with Christ. And I went home. That retreat was 6 or 7 years ago, and obviously with that decision to follow Christ, a lot of things in my life had to change. My lifestyle had to change, my goals had to change, and I really had to decrease for Him to increase. And it's been such a journey, and we only have 15 minutes, and I want to honour the timekeeping here. I suppose just from that first initial encounter of God and his love and of his mercy and his healing power, I now had the ability to go forward and to really connect with him and to spend that time with him in prayer every single day, and to, yes, continue on at school to sit my leaving cert, to discern what it was that he wanted me to do after college. And I know that if it wasn't for my faith as a young person, I'm 22 now, but if it wasn't for that real encounter with Christ at the age of 16, I definitely wouldn't have gone on to college to study theology. I certainly wouldn't have realised this desire for mission, this desire for ministry, if it wasn't for God. And I suppose when we have this experience of Christ in our own lives, we can't but not want to share it with every single person that we meet. And I studied theology, and I did my best to try and learn about the church and about God and about that person that I have a relationship with. And I finished in May, and now I'm on the road full-time, giving secondary school retreats with U2000 for the Year of Faith. And Pope Benedict has spoken an awful lot on the Year of Faith and this urge, if you like, and this challenge to us all to rediscover our Catholic faith. And through the retreat team, being on the road with 2 other great young people, our work is to actually facilitate an encounter with Christ with other young people. And it's just the most amazing experience, the greatest privilege to be able to share that which I've experienced with other young people, and allow the Lord, obviously, to do the best, to do the rest. And I just want to encourage all of us here as we prepare to enter into the reconciliation service to really remove any barriers, anything that might be holding you back, and to really place your trust in God and in his mercy. And it's not like we have this big list of sins that we should feel bad about. It's that, like, the 10 commandments are there as a template for happiness. And when we deal with that sin, we're actually in the best possible place to have that relationship with Christ. And just finally, just as I was preparing for today, I came across a beautiful quote that I think surmises what confession is really about by our Holy Father, Pope Benedict. To appreciate confession ever anew is to rediscover our Lord's tender determination for our holiness and abiding happiness. And today we're given that opportunity to really start afresh with Christ.
Thank you very much, Maura. Well done. Thanks very much, Maura. That's